Hello, everyone. Welcome to this University College London lunch hour lecture, which today is concerned with the Cradle of Humanity, protecting Tanzania's human artifacts. My name is Dr. Andrew Garrard. I'm an honorary, recently retired associate professor from University College London. And it's my great pleasure and an honor to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Renata Peters. Dr. Peters is also an associate professor at UCL in the Institute of Archaeology in Conservation Department, which is actually in the Institute of Archaeology. Renata is a conservator of archaeological collections and indigenous material culture and has worked in sites in South and North America. She's from Brazil, in fact, in Europe and Africa. She specializes in biocultural materials and participatory approaches to museum-related decision-making. She's a head conservator of the Olduvai Geochronology Archaeology Project, which is a cross-disciplinary project in Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. She's also the principal investigator of the research project Weaving Fibers of Resistance, Ticuna or Ticuna Tree Bark and Identity in the Amazon, which is in the upper Solomos River Valley of the Brazilian Amazon. Before we begin, I want to let you know that we will have some time at the end of the lecture for questions, and these could be submitted at any point during the talk by going to slido, sli.do, on your web browser and entering the event code, which is #reuse or #REUSE. I will now hand over to Renata for her talk, which we look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. So I'm Renata Peters. Andrew has already introduced me. So I'm talking from the UCL Institute of Archaeology, where I have been for about 20 years. So I hope you can see on the slide the title of my presentation. It's The Cradle of Humanity, Protecting Tanzanians' Human Artifacts. So what I will do today is discuss the decision-making process involved in the conservation of lithics and fossils excavated by the Olduvai Geochronology Archaeology Project, which I will refer to as OGAP from now on, which works in Tanzania and is part of this ongoing project called Biogeographic and Cultural Adaptations of Early Humans during the first intercontinental dispersal. So long titles here. But let's go back to OGAP. So OGAP has been working in Olduvai for around 20 years now. And it has brought together for all this time an international team of archaeologists, paleoanthropologists, geologists, and conservators, whose main goal is to study the mechanisms of human evolution at Olduvai Gorge. I have been a core member of the team for almost 15 years now. And as lead of the conservation team, I'm involved in excavations and lab work. And I also work on capacity building of local and international colleagues and students. So in this talk today, I will briefly introduce the context of Olduvai, the excavations, the finds, and explain how we work and how we respond to some of the challenges that we encounter there. So I think most people interested in archaeology knows Olduvai Gorge because it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is located in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area in Tanzania. And you can see its location on the map. So it's in the north of Tanzania, close to the Kenyan border. So Olduvai is very famous among archaeologists because of important discoveries of early humans from the Paleolithic period. So we're talking about 1 to 3.5 million years ago. And also famous for its lithics and fossils that all together with the remains of early humans document the evolutionary history of humans, vertebrate fauna, and the environment around them for at least 2 million years. It is also the place where British archaeologists Mary Leakey, who actually studied at UCL for some time in the past, and Louise Leakey worked, and where they found important fossils such as Zingi, which you can see on the slide there. So Zingi is a 1.8 million year old fossil that gave the first evidence of a new and extinct hominid species. This discovery was so important that there were monuments to honor it in Olduvai. You can see one on the slide. And every 17th of July, the date of the discovery, there is a celebration in Olduvai to remember it. Apparently, Mary Leakey and her team restored the pieces together because it was found in fragments, and it took many months to complete because reportedly there were quite a few fragments. Well, because of the work of the Leakeys in Olduvai, today the site is a living museum, and you can see the picture of the entrance in there. And it's also where our labs are located and where we work when we are not in the field. Well, also important in the area are the Laetoli footprints. So Laetoli is the name of a site near Olduvai Gorge, so it's about a 2-hour drive from there, where also Mary Leakey's team found footprints that date to around 3.6 million years ago. That's a long time, right? So these footprints are thought to have been formed when 3 early humans, and you see an artistic impression on the slide in there. So when these 3 early humans walked on wet volcanic ash, and then after they walked on the ash, there was another eruption, and then more ash covered their prints, and they were preserved them. So it's quite amazing what happened in there. But I also have to highlight that Olduvai has extraordinary natural beauty, as you can see on the slide, and impressive geological formations, volcanoes, calderas, and amazing, amazing flora. Also, and I'm sure you're aware of that, Olduvai is very near the Serengeti Plains, where we sometimes can see some of the big five. So really overwhelming. The last point that I want to make about Olduvai is that the Ngorongoro lands, where Olduvai is located, are also home to the Olduvai Maasai, with whom we work and with whom we have formed important professional and personal relationships along the years. So, okay, so that was the preamble. Let's now talk a little bit about archaeology. So the projects, so OGAP's activities include archaeological excavations, surveys, and stratigraphic and geochemical studies in various sites, and some of them are listed on the slide. I will later on comment on finds excavated on various of those sites. But the first thing I should say about what we do, though, is that there is a lot of emphasis on teamwork, on team working. So team members work across the discipline and engage with each other to maximize their own work, right? So the second point that I want to make, and I want to explain about the project, is that Olduvai was one of the first sites in Africa where the traditional view of the Old One Acheulean transition was established. So in very few words, one of the most important aims of this archaeological project of Olduvai work is to shed light on what happened in the period of transition between these two cultures, and especially what happened in the early Acheulean period. I will say a few words about these two cultures now for people who are not familiar with them. So, Old One is the name given to the oldest stone tool industry we know. So these are the earliest evidence of cultural behavior in early humans or our ancestors, right? It happened during the lower Paleolithic period. So we're talking between 2.6 and 1.5 million years ago. And as far as we know, this industry only materialized in East Africa. On the slide, you can see the kind of stone tools that were produced. They were pretty simple, with only a few flakes removed from them. They had this round shapes and sort of rough or roughly finished surfaces. Now, the Acheulean industry is quite different. It also happened in the lower Paleolithic period, but between 1.6 million and 200,000 years ago. In this case, they're also found in other continents, not only in East Africa, like in the case of the Old One industry. As you can see in the picture, the tools are quite different, following a much more sophisticated technology. A good example, and which is depicted on the slide there, are the famous and beautiful bifacial hand axes, which have very sharp edges and anatomical shapes. And some people even call them the Swiss penknife of prehistory. I don't know about that, but some people do say that. I have a few of them here. So after the presentation, well, not real ones, it's replicas, but after the presentation, I can show you if you're curious. But let's move on. And in order to make it a bit easier to explain how we work, I selected a short video to show the process of excavations in one of the sites where OGAP has worked, and a site that we have written a paper about, and that has got some attention. If you're curious about this, you can see more details on the paper that is on the paper whose QR code is on the slide. But let's see here the excavations at the FLK T69 complex. So we started with 2015, and then there is trench 69, 2016, more trenches. Then we're already in 2017 now, 2018. So you see that the trenches now are quite large, right? And busy. And then moving on to 2020, again, quite busy, quite large, and 2021, right? The next, I'm going to show you another short video. I hope you are able to see them from where you are. But in this one, Oh, I think we didn't move, right? Yeah. I'm going to show, yeah, this is the next video, sorry. So in this next video, you're going to see the same site, so FLK T69, so the complex, and in here, you're going to see the distribution of finds, and that's going to be both stone and bone, and also the stratigraphic section, okay? So let's take a look here. So you see all the layers there, and then also the location of the finds. So as you can see, there are quite a few. Different colors mean different materials. I'm going to stop here. So I like stopping at this place in the video, because that's when I see the elephant ribs in the middle there. And whenever I see them, I hope you can see them right in the middle, near the big stone in there. When I see them, I get a little bit excited because I remember there were quite a few of them. And I remember them clearly because they needed a lot of attention in terms of conservation. But let's now go back to how we work as a team to understand what we do in order to understand all this material that we are excavating. So, to summarize, different disciplines in the project and that are represented in the project will look at the finds in different ways, of course. And that will depend on what kind of information they want to extract from them in order to form cohesive and comprehensive theories. So, for example, the archaeologists may look at the lithics to try to establish where raw material was obtained, how it was transported, or the technical features used to produce them, such as, for example, impact points or mapping platforms and so on. Zooarchaeologists, on the other hand, may look at fossilized bones, so like, for example, the elephant ribs that I pointed out for you, to understand taxonomy or signs of human activity. So those can be cut marks, butchering techniques, or even sometimes tooth marks made by animals. Conservators like myself will be in the middle of all this, as we need to understand what our colleagues are trying to find, what they are trying to study, while at the same time making them understand what we can do to help unveil the information that is embedded in the finds and that they are looking for. I will explain some of these processes. So on the slide here, you see find 1575. So this is from another site. When it was first being excavated, so here we are excavating with students. So first it's being prepared for lifting, and then on the then it's so it's first it's being excavated, right? Then it's being prepared for lifting, and then on the last picture you can see how it looked after all the archaeological process had been completed. Here is find 1575 again at the top left in there. You see where the arrow comes from. That's the find plotted on the map, right? And then some of the stages that that will follow that. I want to tell you that for people who are not very familiar with the archaeological process, that finds are not immediately removed from the ground. They may remain in the sediment, they will remain in the sediment in their original positions until they are documented and, in our case, allocated the number. Usually at the end of daily work, they will be taken to the labs for processing, inventory, and or conservation. And all information is going to be entered on the project's database. So there are many steps that need to be taken before the find can be studied and photographed for publications. Still, some people may assume that because of the nature of the site and the fact that we are excavating inorganic materials such as stone tools or animal fossils, they may assume that artifacts are going to be unveiled in very good condition, or that the material is always strong, resistant, and won't need much care. Well, let's see if that's true, right? I think you can already see on the slide that this is not necessarily true. It may be sometimes, but not necessarily true. Even finds that look in very good condition when excavated, when being unveiled by the excavators, may actually be very fragile. The moment of excavation itself is very risky and is when a lot of deterioration mechanisms may be triggered. Even pristine finds that have been protected by the volcanic environment of Olduvai for a long time may also need attention. For example, even the surrounding matrix that works as a support to the physical integration of the finds may also be a problem. First, because, as you can see, a little bit of that in the first picture, but then I will show you more. First, because it may obscure surfaces, and therefore it will undermine examination. So you will have to remove that. Second, because the matrix may be the only thing that is keeping the find together. When you remove it, the find may simply fall apart in hundreds of fragments. And unfortunately, I'm not exaggerating. And here are a couple of examples, right? Also, in terms of the archaeological context, because of the great pressure surrounding these finds, some of them may have become crushed in the ground, cracked or deformed by the very layers of sediments that protected them as well. So there are lots of things happening at the same time, and some of them may sound a bit contradictory. But often specimens may need to be stabilized by temporary consolidation before being lifted and transported to the labs. Of course, there are also cases of beautifully preserved finds, right? Well, not this one, though. This one is just here because, like I said, finds may be pristine, but impossible to be studied because they are covered by concretions that may obscure their surfaces. And some of these concretions may be silicates or carbonates. This means that they need to undergo lots of mechanical treatments with rotary and abrasive tools so that the surface is revealed. All the conservation issues here, right? This one and the other ones that I that I mentioned before, of course, need to be dealt with meticulously. And for this, you need a lot of patience. You also need skills and strong knowledge bases of how the raw materials may react to the treatments. Let's see. And then another find that looked misleadingly stable and strong. But let's go on. As I said, I have been a core member of this project for almost 15 years now, And as such, I founded the conservation team from the ground up and established it as a crucial part of the research that happens in our team, with our team. So when I started, there was no conservation team associated with the project, and efforts to improve condition and readability of the finds were done on an ad hoc basis. Since then, I have trained many international and Tanzanian colleagues that worked in the project in different periods, and I have established a tested protocol to treat the finds of the excavation. Our main aim has always been to ensure that the specimens are excavated safely, that fragile or fragmented material does not suffer unnecessary damage or losses during the studies, that they are treated in a way that allow the studies to happen. This is important, right? Because this is the essence of the project, but also that they can be restudied in the future and, if needed, retreated in the future. Our conservation lab is a busy workspace as we work with the assistance of local Maasai and Tanzanian colleagues, excavators, trainees, and also international and Tanzanian students that may have joined us for the season. Specimens that need conservation are singled out during the excavation or at its arrival at the leaky camp, either by the lead excavators or one of the conservators on duty at the time. And as you have seen on the images I have shown and on the images on the slide now, we have to deal with a huge number of variables that start in the field, right? But travel very quickly to the labs. But let's now go back to the bone tools from the FLK excavations before I tell you a bit more about what the conservators do. Here, I want to show you another short video. And in this one, you're going to see the moment the bone tools that were excavated from the FLK complex were revealed. Although some of them do look amazing already, just by being brushed in there, some of them did require quite a bit of work before being studied. And I will show a couple of examples after we finish the little video here. Again, all these videos are available on Nature, issue 640, where our paper was published, okay? But anyway, let's see what we do to those, to the finds that are excavated. Oops. So remember find 1575, here it is again. Let's go through it again, but in more detail this time. So the first image on the upper left shows the find when it started to be revealed in the ground. It took a long time to reveal it because the soil was extremely hard and we could only excavate with small tools so as not to damage it, because we could see that it was really, really amazing, in amazing condition, and we really wanted to lift it home. Then on the image below that, you see the find again with more areas revealed, now being prepared to be lifted. And on the upper right side, the specimen has already been prepared for block lifting after being consolidated with a resin called paraloid B44. So this is a copolymer of methyl methacrylate and ethyl acrylate. We also used cyclododecane, which we call CDD, and we also stabilized it with bandages that were impregnated with plaster of Paris. And the last picture, finally, the specimen after conservation, but we shouldn't be fooled here, right? There were many hours of work between the third and the fourth picture. For people who might be curious, cyclododecane is a waxy material, so it's a waxy hydrocarbon. And we sometimes use it as a temporary consolidant for various reasons. First, because it can be melted with heat. It sublimes at room temperature, so when you want to remove it, you just have to wait, and you don't have to use solvents to remove it. So it also doesn't produce much waste. But there are some complications associated with it because you need to heat it up. And if you are in the field, it is more difficult. Also, you do need a lot of practice and skills to be able to apply it quickly because it is going to solidify very quickly. So we usually apply it on cracks, on fragile finds in preparation for block lifting. Now, another find, so in this case, it's a rhino femur from another site, but here we're doing similar things. First, consolidating it with cyclododecane, so CDD, then preparing for lifting with bandages, and finally, the femur being treated in the lab. Just one picture for many hours of work. But it's crucial to highlight here that we have to remove the sediments and possible accretions without making any changes to the surface. Otherwise, the studies that the archaeologists and the zooarchaeologists will do afterwards will be undermined. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But to summarize, conservation work may take many, many hours to complete before the finds are ready to their next life, right? So being the subject of studies. Like this one that we have on the slide now, right? So in here, what we have here is a picture from the paper that I already mentioned, right? So systematic bone tool production at 1 million years ago. This paper discusses a group of 27 animal fossils excavated in the FLK complex. So I showed you a few videos on the FLK complex. So I think you probably remember that. So during the excavation and during the conservation work, the team started examining these finds and found that these are actual tools that were shaped by napping. So all of them were bone, right? So all of them were fossilized bone, but they found that the shapes that they had were not accidental. They were actually chipped. The surfaces were chipped to form other shapes, right? These are mainly, so all of them, remember, in the same horizon, in the same site. And mainly, except for one, I think, they were large mammal limb bones, right? So fragments from hippos and elephants. And as you can see in the pictures, they were shaped to produce various tools. Before our study, before the conclusions of this study, bone artifact production in similar contexts in Africa were considered as episodic and unrepresentative because there was no evidence, no strong evidence like we have, like 27 finds from the same context. So they were really considered unrepresentative, and nobody could form any cohesive theory with them. However, our results demonstrate that at the transition, so remember that's where we are excavating, right? So the layer is in the transition between the old one and the early Acheulean in Olduvai. We found that hominins actually developed an original cultural innovation that entailed the transfer and adaptation of napping skills from what they had been doing on stone to bone. So to show you more pictures of the same study, we can say that by producing technologically and morphologically standardized bone tools, these tool makers, the Acheulean tool makers, actually unraveled technological repertoires, right, that previously thought to have appeared 1 million years later. So the work has shown evidence that actually no, that it happened much earlier. So there are many conclusions that you can draw from this, and I'm curious to hear what people think, but these technological skills, these advances really suggest a different level of cognitive ability, right? That we didn't really have evidence for before this work. We also have to recognize that at that time, animals did not just were not there just as food, right? So they did not just provide a source of meat, but also of raw materials for tools, which is quite interesting and new for that period. The study also suggests that the hominins had anatomical knowledge and some understanding of bone morphology and structure. There is a clear preference for thick limb bones. So limb bones, as you know, or the densest and the strongest bones in the body of an animal. And clearly, in this assemblage, there was a preference for that. One more point to think about is that when they napped the tools we examined, the bone was likely to still contain some collagen and water. And collagen would have provided more elasticity to the bone, right? So making it a bit softer to nap, to shape, softer than stone, right? So not really soft, but softer than stone. However, bone can also break if struck too forcefully. So the skills really had to be adapted. Well, if you want to know more about this project and what we did there, please do look at the article, right? The QR code is on the slide again here. But before I finish the presentation, I want to add one final detail that may sound slightly marginal to the research, but actually is very important for us, which is that some activities that we organize when we're working in the field. So for example, to engage directly with more members of the local community, we sometimes organize activities such as beadworking workshops, and we invite local Maasai women to teach these workshops, right? So in these cases, raw materials are procured locally, and they are hired as teachers. So this allows us to learn more about Maasai culture, but also reverses our roles. us researchers and knowledge holders all the time and encourages stronger and more democratic relationships to occur. So we're not always the ones that know everything, right? So we put ourselves in the position of someone who is learning. These engagements also offer financial benefits to the Maasai women, and because it allows them to sell their products or earn commissions from members of the archaeological team or anybody that is visiting. They also reposition the Maasai women as central figures in the project's activities, so I'm quite fond of these activities. In the latest season that we had last October, though, I decided to diversify a bit. And instead, I consulted with some Maasai friends on how to extract fibers of local plants that you can see on the slide there, called Olduvai. So Olduvai is actually the reason it's a Maasai word, and it's actually the reason why the area is called Olduvai. So I asked many people to see who knew how to extract the fibers, because you could see that the fibers were very long and very strong. And it was very difficult to find someone. There were many people that had theories, but nobody really knew how to do it until finally I found Joseph Julius, who is depicted on the picture in there. Joseph was working in the project kitchen, and he patiently showed us all the steps involved in this really fascinating activity. Anyway, I hope this presentation gave you an overview of the activities involved in scientific inquiries of this nature, as well as the role that conservation plays in knowledge production. If you want to know more, please look at the articles. There is a new one that I put in there. No QR codes this time, but both articles are available on open access. And of course, we have to thank many institutions here that have supported this work for many years. So first, the UCL Institute of Archaeology, where I work, but also the Ngorongoro Conservation Area Authority, the Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology, and the Department of Antiquities. The ERC, of course, for giving us already 2 grants to work there, the Spanish National Research Council, and the National Museum of Tanzania, and of course, all the people that have worked with us and that hopefully will work with us in the near future, hopefully. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something from the talk, and I look forward to hearing any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That was a really interesting talk, Renata, and I'm sure there'll be quite a few questions coming your direction very shortly. I could potentially start with a couple of questions, which I was interested in. Most of my own work as an archaeologist has been on the later Paleolithic rather than the earlier Paleolithic. But I was curious actually that, or interested that a lot of your initial extraction procedures and so on are all done very carefully by mechanical means, or it seemed to be from your illustrations. And I just wondered with concretions, which you often have, like breccia or concretions covering bones and so on, whether you ever use any very dilute, like acetic acid or acids, which can actually remove concretions, or whether that's completely frowned upon for material of this kind.
It's not really frowned upon, even though we don't use it in Olduvai, but we don't use it in Olduvai because there is no current water in Olduvai. So the water that we have available in the site and for the lab work is brought in a truck every week. Also, if we use chemicals for the removal of the concretions, we will have to use a lot of that water and we'll have to dispose of the water. And we don't really have the means to do that in an environmentally responsible way in Olduvai. However, whenever we had permission to bring some of the finds outside Tanzania, so sometimes to London, sometimes to Spain, some of the stone tools may have been treated with chemicals, not the bone fossils, that's not possible, but the stone tools, some of them may have been. But basically, it's a choice because of the limitations that we have in a place that's very far from any urban center. So it's about 2 hours away from Karatu, but in Karatu we wouldn't be able to buy chemicals or anything like that. It's about 5 hours from Arusha. So we really have to be very conscientious about the kind of techniques and methods we use. So, yeah.
It's okay. Can I ask if there are any questions from the audience who are listening today? I'm just going to quickly check. Otherwise, I'll ask another one.
Yeah, did you find the questions? Yeah.
No. Okay, well, just another question, actually. Have you found... Oh, yes, there you have a replica.
Oh yeah, I did mention during the talk, right, that we had some replicas. So okay, this is very light, so you can see it's made of acrylic, really. But this is a replica of an Acheulean bifacial hand axe. So you can see clearly the flakes that were removed, and the edges were very sharp. They're quite huge, right? This one wasn't painted, so they were printed in something called white nylon, so they come out of the printer like that. And then I painted them looking at the original to make them look like, yeah. And these are very useful for the students here at the Institute of Archaeology. So they actually they conduct lots of studies and using the collections that we have, the replicas that we have.
I was just wondering also, I mean, you were mainly focusing on 2 sites or 1 or 2 sites and so on, but I know you over the 15 years you've worked on a wide range of sites with Ignacio de la Torre. And I'm just wondering if preservation conditions of particularly of bones and so on are very different in the different sediments you've encountered in the various sites you've worked on at Olduvai. I mean, do you have some sediments where it's always a nightmare in terms of preservation and others where you have more durability and so on?
Yes, indeed, very different. Even in the same trench, in different areas of the trench, you can get very different conditions. So, depending on the soil, depending on what happened in that area. So we have seen some very dramatic difference. This is actually, if anybody is interested in writing up a PhD proposal for this kind of material, this is something that would have a lot of relevance. So studying the influence of the context on the preservation of the actual material. This is something that we're very interested in, and that happens quite a lot. Very different, very, very dramatic differences as well, in both stone and also the fossilized bone. Yeah.
It's interesting you're talking about the stone conservation required. I know there's a famous site in Israel, Gesher Ben Yaakov, where the artifacts were the hand axes in that case and cleavers were made in basalt, which you would think would be incredibly durable. But the sediments were slightly waterlogged, and as soon as these artifacts were excavated, they just started to fall apart completely, and they had to soak them, for a very sustained long period in water, and then slowly replace the water with, I guess, other materials and so on. But you think of basalt being sort of durable for eternity, but of course it's not. I'm sure your quartzites and some of the other stone materials, your phonolites and other raw materials being used at Olduvai, you had the same problems, perhaps. Maybe not as bad
Yeah,
as.
we did. Definitely we did. And that's, I'm always surprised when, well, not very long ago, somebody said to me, I had just arrived from Olduvai, so I was there in October. And somebody said to me, oh, but you probably don't have much to do there, right? Because they are excavating lithics and fossils, and those are very strong. But like I tried to get that across with my presentation, that this idea is actually not based on reality. It may happen, and you saw in the video some of the artifacts coming out from the ground in really great condition. But this is not really the rule. So actually, they can be incredibly fragile. And like you said, when you excavate it, because when you excavate, so the artifact is there for millions of years under the ground, and they are safe and they are stable. And suddenly, when we excavate, it's as if we're giving a shock to the artifacts, right? Because suddenly we are exposing them to all these different things, like light, like different humidities, different temperatures that will change from the morning to the night. People are going to start handling them. There is going to be vibration. The soil that's keeping it together is going to be removed. Sometimes they're going to be washed, right? So it is a series of shocks that happen when an artifact is excavated. So it is a misconception to believe that just because of what the raw material is, that they are going to be strong. They're not. They may be very heavy, they may look strong, but that's not necessarily true. They can be very peculiar and need a lot of attention.
Thank you. There are now two questions come up on the screen here from people attending your lecture. The first one, anonymous, it says, it's a wonderful lecture, thank you. How do you allow for future chemical analysis, e.g. stable isotopes of the bones when conserving them, or is that not an issue? That's the first of two questions.
So you mean, I suppose the person means the impact of using chemicals on the artifacts, the impact for things like dating and things like that, right? So
The
as
stable
far as I
isotope
know,
analysis.
yeah,
Yes.
well, most of the fossils or long bones which are not usually very good for dating anyway, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
also it's the age of the artifacts that so far we haven't developed the technology to be able to date them. And this is something that really that I'm quite concerned about for the future, but we haven't really found a solution for. But anything that you do to the artifacts definitely is going to be part of its biography from now on, and there is going to be a trace of that on them. Right? So it is something that I am concerned about, but it's something that is not on the agenda yet because it hasn't been a problem yet, but it doesn't mean that in the future it won't be. So definitely this is another area for research.
I guess this person was also thinking about stable isotope analysis, which is sometimes done on bones of fauna as well as humans to get more information on their diet and so on of these animals as well as humans. But I know that's applied a lot in more recent context, Paleolithic context and and historic context and so on. But the second question has come in. Just says, great talk. Thank you very much. And asking, is it difficult to get the green light from governments, depending on where you excavate? How easy is it getting the green light or the permission from governments to work in places like Tanzania?
It's not easy.
Yeah.
There are many stages. There are many institutions that you have to ask different permits to.
Yeah.
So it's quite complex. If you look at my slide with the acknowledgements, some of those institutions are institutions that we need permits from. So we need permits from the Department of Antiquities, but we also need permits to get into the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, which is, by the way, where Serengeti is as well. We need different permits to be able to do research, depending on how many days we're going to stay there. We need other kinds of permits to be able to sleep in the Liki camp. So we have tents there, right? So we camp there. So each day that you stay there adds a certain fee to your permit. So it's not very easy. They're quite meticulous in terms of what kind of research you're going to do, what the impact is going to be, how much you're going to engage with the local population in terms of building capacities, but also in terms of enriching the archaeological context of Olduvai. So they're very meticulous. They have lots of important criteria. But as OGAP has been working there for around 20 years, they know, even though these things change as well, right? They evolve. Bureaucracy does evolve, right? So, but it's an important aspect of the project. So it's also not very cheap. So for each of these permits, you have to pay certain fees.
Well, it's wonderful to see. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of Tanzanian staff working with you, or people you trained yourselves, or people who actually have developed the skills elsewhere and so on, and join the team. So it's very much a co-project with Tanzanians, of course.
Yeah, this is something that I'm very proud of in this project, that personally I have been able to train many people. And these people, every year that I come back, they're better and better. And they also have trained other people. Another thing that is interesting is that because there are so many archaeological sites in Tanzania and archaeologists working in there, so these individuals can also find employment in other projects when we are not there, right? But I'm really happy, very pleased every time I come back and when I see the skills developing, and they also teach me a lot. So yeah, it's really great work, and I find the capacity building aspect of the work especially encouraging and motivating personally.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Renata, for your talk, and I'm sure everyone would agree they've really been fascinating and really enjoyed it. Could you please show the audience your last slide for the QR code so they can provide feedback on the talk? Is it possible to show the last slide, which has a QR code on? I think that's the one. Yes. So if anybody,
this is the for questions. This is for. Oops. No.
yes, if anybody would like to give feedback on the lecture or the UCL, I think this is a QR code you need.
Yeah, this is the QR code for, I think,
So please,
giving feedback.
please give feedback it'd be very helpful for those who organize the UCL lectures. And whilst you're doing that, I'd just like to let the audience know that the next UCL lunch hour lecture will be on smartphone-free childhoods. That's an very, very appropriate topic.
Couldn't be more different.
Smartphone-free childhoods. And it takes place on the 9th of December between 1 and 2 p.m. or 1300 and 1400 p.m. So I'll give everyone a little bit more time to, do the QR codes. So
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you the audience for attending as well.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.